Paul Kossoff had no pedal board, just an amplifier, a Les Paul and these. But what if he could get that snarling lead sound at bedroom levels? Today I'm going to attempt just that. I'll be building a Hello Sailor Effects FreeRange pedal by hand using nothing but Tagboard and Mojo components. This project's one that you can do yourself at home to add some mojo to your tone. This is a special one today. Of course, it is the FreeRange, which basically is my signature overdrive. I love the Kossoff Drive, it's my favourite overdrive pedal. And then I really love a Rangemaster because that's amazing as well. What a pedal, Rangemaster. So put them together, Free for Paul Kossoff, his band, and Range for Rangemaster, and you get my favourite pedal in the world. Now this is obviously a dual pedal, so we've got two halves to this. We've got our Rangemaster half with the boost on it, and we're going to have an EQ switch, and then we've got the Kossoff half, which is going to have our gain, treble and volume. Brilliant. What's the enclosure? I mean, come on now, this is pretty cool. We've got real leather. It's upholstery leather meant for, like, I don't know, couches and the like. And in the centre here, we've got some proper paisley. This is the actual stuff that Fender would have used in a day. And I've put them both together. To save time, I've added all like the stomp switches and stuff to the enclosure. I still need to add my jacks in. And that's just because this video is going to be so long. Because there's a fair bit to get through. We've got 2 circuits to go. All going to go on one tagboard. Now, every single time I post a video with tagboard, people ask me, where do I buy my tagboard from? I get it from hi-ficollective.co.uk. They have a range of tagboards. Some of them have gold tags on them. They're fantastic. Right, this is going to sit over here, sort of towards the middle, right here. And it's going to be raised right up so it's out the way. Sort of level with these switches here. And it's just going to sit there like that. Perfect. What I'm going to do is I'll wire in my Rangemaster in the first 5 tags, because this is our Rangemaster half here, because when the pedal is upside down, the input is on the right. Mess that up every single time. So the first 5 tags are going to be our Rangemaster, and then the last 8 tags are going to be our Kossoff Drive. Right now I'm going to tackle just the Rangemaster. So if we get that out the way, this is what we're working with over here. We've got our resistors, our capacitors for the switch, and then a potentiometer, I suppose it is, a trim pot. Paul Kossoff's playing wasn't about gear, it was about emotion. He had such a great touch, he could make one note sound like an entire song. And that's what I'm aiming for today. I'm going to be building a dual overdrive pedal that you can build at home. You don't have to use expensive components. You could build it out of anything, out of the cheapest components you can find. I implore you, please do so. I'll be showing you the whole process so you can add this tone to your repertoire. So where to start? The first component going in is a 68k resistor. I've seen some people add in a 100k trim pot for this position. I used to do that myself, but you don't really need it, so I'm not going to. Our drawing shows the 68k resistor goes into the first tag on the bottom row and the second tag on the top row. When you're putting this in, don't solder the top row because we've got some more components going in there. Also, just before anyone asks me and I end up going through 7,000 conversations about it, I do not have a schematic for this pedal. I built these completely from my head. I've made this crappy layout drawing because otherwise people are going to keep asking me about it. When I did my Kossoff Drive, alright, it got nearly 70,000 views on that one, so thank you very much to anyone who watched that build and made up with it. But most of the comments on it were asking me for the schematic, and my brain just doesn't work like that. It seems a little bit too academic for me, like it's for clever people. So quite frankly, for me, it's going to be just build along with me, and then maybe you can print the layout if you want to take a screen grab of it, whatever. Anyway, so there's our first resistor in there. That's going to supply some voltage into the pedal. Next up, we've got our input cap. For this pedal, we're going to have 3 input caps essentially. We're going to have this 4.7 NF capacitor. It's an Erie cap. It's an old one. Great. That's going to go in here. That's our treble position. Then, if we want to add a bit more, on our switch, we're going to have this 6.8 NF Mullard, tropical fish then, Mullard mustard cap. I love these caps, brilliant. Not sure if I'm going to be able to squeeze it in there because it'll be sitting this side and our pedal's going to be here and our jacks are going to be around it, but I'm going to try my best to get this in there because these are my favourite Rangemaster capacitors. Then on the other side, you flick it into bass mode, we're going to have this, which is a 22NF tropical fish cap, Mullard again. But for the board, the only one that's mounted on there, just to keep the board down, the board size down, I should say, is this 4.7. Just going to clean the legs off a bit because these are super old and they do get a bit cruddy. Again, if my Kossoff Drive video is anything to go by, I'm going to get a ton of people in the comments telling me that they could build this pedal in a tiny enclosure and fit it somewhere small because they can build it with SMD components or they can build it on a PCB for a quarter of the price of what I sell these for. Brilliant. If you want to do that, you're more than welcome to. In fact, I want to hear about it. Please let me know. It'd be great to see how it sounds. And if it sounds awesome, I really hope it does sound awesome because, you know, it's my pedal design. I'll be made up, but I got a lot of, really a lot of heckling going on for me putting Tagboard and big components in a Kossoff Drive, which is insane because if you've been following my channel for any length of time, you know that's kind of the point of my channel. Anyway, so if you want to build it cheap, please do let me know. I'd be interested to hear how you get on. Next up and last to go in the second pin on the top row, or the second tag, is this 470k resistor. So this goes from there into the third tag on the bottom row. Now when I'm putting resistors in, what I like to do is I like to slide the resistor through the top tag, which is going to be the one that I need to bend. I'll show you in a second. As far as it'll go, and then snip this bottom leg so then it's shorter than where the tag is. And once we slide it through, what we can do is we can line it up to where we want it to be. Take our flat nose Nipex pliers. By the way, these both pairs are available through the affiliates link in the description. That takes you through to Amazon. No extra charge to yourself, but I'll get a little kickback. It helps the show. Helps me buy things like these Nipex snips, for example. Yeah, and bend it so then the resistor's sitting straight on the board. Now, but going into the same hole. And, you know, it doesn't make it sound any different, but it does make me feel better. And if I feel better, the pedal's better. Because after all, our guitar toys are there to make us feel better. And now we can solder both sides of this one. Like so, and if we give that a tidy up, that's our first 3 components in place. Thank you so much to everyone who supported Hello Sailor Effects so far. This YouTube channel's been mad. It's been a wild year. We've grown in such a huge, amazing way, and I thank you all. If you're watching this video and you're finding value, please hit the like button or the subscribe button, and that'll help YouTube save my content to more people, and it'll help me grow again. Thank you. Now we're on to our first of our electrolytic caps. So I've got these 32 microfarad, 32 UF caps. I really like them. I know a Rangemaster, the standard for this position is 47 UF, 47 microfarad. But yeah, I'm a little bit influenced, well, a few things really. Firstly, I'm a little bit influenced by the old Cesar Diaz thing. His Texas, well, no, not the Texas Squareface, what's it called? Texas Ranger, the Rangemaster pedal he did, had 32 UFs in there. And I think, from my guess, the thinking behind that is if you lower the value of these caps, you take away a little bit of bass. It certainly works that way in amplifiers when you change the filtering caps and stuff. So I think that's what he was going for. I'm not entirely sure because he's not around to ask. But anyway, the reason too, and probably the main reason, is I found a large batch of these caps, military spec, for a little bit cheap. Well, cheap for what they are, and they all test good, so I bought a lot and now I like to use them in my Rangemasters. For this position, because it's in the middle of the tagboard, it's going to be difficult to deal with. I like to bend the legs over so they're pointing towards themselves, like this. And then we take our Nipex snips, pick somewhere roughly halfway down the leg and just bend it back on itself. And same again for this side, bend it back on itself. You may think that's a bit weird why you're doing that, but this is going to make the cap sit higher than the tagboard, which means that this big component isn't in the way of all these components down here. Just works better that way. And also, because the body of this component is wider than the tags, with it sitting higher and then bent in on itself, it actually fits. Now when you're putting this in, you want to have the positive side of this capacitor, because they're polar, it's an electrolytic, into the fourth tag along on the bottom row. So fourth tag along is the positive. On this particular cap, how do we know the positive? The positive has a little dimple in. And these ones have a red end to them, but most caps don't. So if it's an axial electrolytic, your dimple side will be your positive. If it's not axial and it's one of these bad boys, you'll have a negative stripe going down the negative side, or the positive leg will be longer. So you can use either type. So with our positive leg going down to the bottom and our negative going to the top, so the negative goes to the third tag along on the top row, positive to the fourth tag along on the bottom row. We can't solder the bottom row because we've got another component going in there. And slide that through. And then once that's in place, what I like to do is solder just this leg, the negative leg in place, because nothing else is going in there. And that'll hold the cap in. And then while it's there, we can lift it up straight for the start. And then once it's straight, you don't have to do this, by the way, but I do like to do it. You just grab the cap with 2 fingers and bend it, so then it's sitting straight on the tagboard. For no other reason than it keeps it looking uniform and straight. I like it, and that's the way that I do it. And I suppose it does keep it out the way of other caps on this side, or other parts that we're going to fit on this side. Not that there's much to go on that side, that is. Next up, I'm going to be using one of my legs that I cut off my input cap. You could use some solid core wire. I'll have an affiliate link to that down below. Or you could just use some of your normal wire. It's completely up to you. We're just going to put a jumper in. This jumper is going to go from the positive side of this cap, which is tag 4, up to tag 4 on the top row. It's good if you save your component legs and you have some components with long legs to save them, so then you can do this sort of thing with. Don't worry if not. I mean, you can, as long as you join these two together, doesn't matter. I mean, you could even join them on the bottom if you really wanted to keep this out the way. We can solder both halves of this in though, because there's nothing else going into these tags. Well, not into this side of these tags anyway. And then after I tidy up, there we are. Now we're on to the last component in the centre row of our Rangemaster, which is going to be this. It's an ITT cap. I love these things. It's 10NF if anyone's wondering. I know I do have a tendency to race through and not say what the component values are and whatnot. Apologies for that, I just get excited. This is a 10NF, it's a rather nice one. For this, I'm going to take my flat-nosed Knipex snips and I'm going to use the tip as a spacer. So I'm going to situate the tip right up against the body of the cap, squeeze to hold onto it, and I'm going to take my finger and just bend the leg 90 degrees, like that. All that's going to do is make the cap sit off the board, which means that it's out the way of other components. And I'm using my Knipex snips in this fashion because then I know that both legs are sat up the same length, or the same height I should say, length what I'm talking about. And that's just going to go in the 5th tag along from the top to the 5th tag along on the bottom. There we are. Now we can give that a solder. Tend to solder one leg in, and then once that's in place you can straighten the cap up and you know, make sure that it's not fouling anything, or just make sure it's looking good and in the right position. Again, if you're using small caps, you'll have loads of space to squeeze all this in. You really don't need to struggle with the big electrolytics if you don't want to. But if you are going to struggle with some vintage components, please let me know. I've had a lot of people build my pedals, especially like the Kossoff Drive. Loads of people built that, but most people built it with cheap components. I want to see someone build it with more expensive components than me, like more outrageous. That'd be amazing. Right, so now all of our centre row is done. We're going to do the off-board wiring, I like to call it, and I'm going to start at the front here. Now there's 2 things that we need to add to the front of this. The first one is a 1 meg resistor. I've got these old, I don't know if these are carbon comp, they might be carbon film. If anyone knows, let me know in the comments, that'd be interesting. I bought a big batch of these, but I am running rather low, funnily enough. So for this, I'm just going to take one leg and bend it over on itself, kind of like I say the Ibanez method of doing it from the old tube screamers that had all the components bent over. Take a cut of it, probably about, I don't know, 10 mil, bit less than 10 mil below the body. I mean, you can make it bigger if you want. And I'm going to put it between the second tag and the third tag along on the bottom row. What I like to do is put the body of the resistor in the second tag along, because something else is going in the third tag, so there'll be less in the way. Not that it matters, because this resistor is really small. There, like that. Now, I'm just going to solder in the one side, which is our input cap side, the second tag along. That's the only one we're going to solder at the minute. Like this. There. Now, I need to straighten this up, but soldering to these center tags takes a ton of heat. So this thing's going to be absolutely roasting. So if you don't want to go and grab it straight away, have a tendency to do that. Once it's straight, we can move on to the next bit, which is our, well, 47 UF cap if you're building just a standard Rangemaster, or 32 microfarad if you're building a Hello Sailor Effects Rangemaster. At this point, I'm not even sure it's fair to call this a Rangemaster. I've tweaked my way past Rangemaster, I think. I think that's just the standard topology of it is probably where it started. Right, legs are straightened out, and because these are old, they're going to need the legs cleaning. Awesome. Now, with this one, it's going to sit in the third tag along, which is awkward because we've got this cap in a way and we've got this in a way. So what I like to do is the negative side of our cap, remember we talked about which one's the negative, we're just going to bend that straight down. Done. Not going to touch that again. The positive side, we're going to bend straight down, and then we're going to bend it back on itself, like this, and measure, put the cap, offer the cap up to the tags, and measure where the first tag is. And all we do is we take our snips, or you could use your flat nose pliers if you're worried about snipping a leg. I do snip the leg quite often. Flat nose pliers, and line them up with the first tag, and then bend that over. We can then afterwards go ahead and straighten it all out, because it gets rather twisted while you're doing that. Bend it over, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take our snips and snip both legs so that then they're roughly the same height, quite long as well, because it's got to get over the top of this resistor and then situate it in there like that. And the first tag to solder in is going to be our resistor end. Not that it matters, because we're going to solder them both. But what I find is, while the cap's leaning over to one side, it's easier to get into this end because there's more going on. So once that's soldered in, we can straighten up our cap, get it around that resistor. I mean, maybe we bend the resistor in a little bit and the cap up like that. Yep, fine. Now we can twist this on its side and we can still get in to this tag here because there's nothing this side of it. Can't tell you the amount of times that I've soldered the wrong side of that, and then I have to squeeze my soldering iron into tag 3 and end up burning something. Of course I do. Right, now that's in place. That is all of our off-board or our outside tag wiring on this side done. Brilliant. We're going to move on to our potentiometer. Now we're on to our potentiometer. This is interesting. I've got these pots, which are spectral. They're really old, and people do always ask me where to source them from. I just bought a rather large batch of them. So when they're gone, they're gone. I don't know where you can get more. If you do know where you can get more, please let me know, because I would love, absolutely love to buy more. So just quickly, how a potentiometer works. So this part has 3 legs. It has two legs at the front here, which are the end of the carbon track. So if you imagine, the carbon track here is from this leg, the carbon track goes round and then attaches to this leg. This leg here in the center is called the wiper. So that's attached to what could be described as like a clock arm, if you like, that's touching the carbon track. And it's in the centre. So if you move this wiper round towards this leg, what we're going to have is a small amount of resistance between where the tip of this is and this leg. But there's going to be a larger amount of resistance between where this is and this leg. And that's how the potentiometer works. But for this one, the way that we're going to wire this up is we only want 2 connections because we're using it like a variable resistor. So to do that, we join 2 legs together. So if we join them 2 legs together, they become the wiper. And this becomes the end of track, if you like, and that's it. Right. Chances are your potentiometer or trim pot, a trim pot is a potentiometer, just mini. Your trim pot is not going to look like this one because these are reasonably hard to come by and quite expensive. Yours will most probably look like this. So on the bottom, you've got 3 legs. 1, 2, 3. The 2 of them that are level with each other are the end of track. And the one that's sat forward on this one here is the wiper. So for this one, if I was going to use this, I would join 2 of the legs together. The wiper and one of the end of tracks. That's one leg. And the other leg would just be the other one. Seems really simple, doesn't it? But if you have one of these, what I like to do is bend one leg over, because that's going to go directly into our tag board. And I have to give it a little twist, but you have to be careful because these are so fragile and the legs snap quite easily. Now this is going to go between the 4th tag along on the top row and the 3rd tag along on the top row. But right now I'm just going to slot it into the 4th tag along. If we can get it in there, like so. Hopefully it stands up. It won't be particularly straight, but it'll be, you know, there or thereabouts. And then I can solder that in place. Ever so quickly, because they really don't like heat that much. And then when that one leg's in, you can straighten it up so it looks pretty. I mean, let's face it, that's important. It just is. Now, if you remember, I said that we solder them 2 legs together. Well, to solder them 2 legs together, first of all, I've got to add a bit of wire. And we want it to also go into the 3rd tag along. So if I take another one of my component legs, the offcuts, I can slot this through pin 3, like so, and solder it in place. Brilliant. Give that a tidy up. So there's pin 3 connected. Now, if I bend this over, so that then it touches both legs. First of all, I want to make sure it touches the end of track leg, and then I want to make sure it touches the wiper. So you just got to make sure that there's a good solid connection where they are actually physically touching next to it. And then same with this one here. I like to just bend it over a little bit. And while that's there, we can solder both of them to it. So this one first, then this one there. Now, all 3 of them points are joined together now. So we've got our 3rd tag along and both of our legs of our potentiometer. And that makes basically a variable resistor, so a resistor between the 3rd tag and the 4th tag that we can change with our screwdriver. And that's how we're going to bias our transistor. Speaking of which, the transistor's next. The germanium transistor makes or breaks the tone of a Rangemaster. And as you probably know, I've got a huge selection of vintage and mojo parts to choose from. That's because I've been collecting them for years. Stick around to the end and you'll see which transistor I choose for this build and how it sounds, especially in the context of this pedal. I think you're going to like it. This is my favourite bit about building a Rangemaster, is going through the transistors and deciding which one to use. Now, first up for the audition is this. I'm sure you've all seen this. It's a CV7001. It is a military spec NKT germanium transistor. These were made for the British military. I don't think I'm going to use this one because you've all seen me use it a million times over in my latest Rangemaster builds. And I want this to be a little bit different. After all, We're going after Paul Kossoff's tone with the FreeRange. It needs to be like the 70s. I know Paul's tone might not have been as aggressive as some in the 70s, but it was still pretty aggressive, right? So right now it's telling us it's a PNP germanium. Gives us our pinout. Great. Says that our current gain, our HFE, which is how strong the transistor is, if you like, that is at 84. Gives us some other information, and then a leakage current. So that's 150 odd milliamps. Banging. This is right in the range, the golden range for the Rangemaster that most people would go for, which is set between 70 and 100 and between, 0 and 150 HFE, whatever. It's a great transistor, but I'm not going to use that. So then I thought maybe I could upscale this and get something that I haven't got as many of that's a bit rarer. And I thought about this. This is an NKT 677 that I reclaimed from an old radio. One of the radios that houses the fabled and feared and coveted NKT 275. I did get an NKT 275 from this radio, but this was one of the other transistors in there. I know it's real because I reclaimed it myself. These do sound fantastic when in spec, especially in a Rangemaster. Do also like them in a fuzz. I mean, a 2-transistor fuzz like a fuzz face and a Rangemaster, they're kind of the same topology. So, of course, they do work well with the same things. PNP germanium gives us our pinout. Now, this is a whopping 267 HFE. Wow. So, for gain, that is massive for the germanium. You don't find germaniums that strong. I'm thinking that this is going to be very, very leaky. Usually when you get gain that high, it's because the transistor's leaky. And that's why. So if we go through... Oh. What? So the leakage current is basically 80 something. So the leakage current is less than the leakage on this one, which I said was perfect. So this is going to be super strong, super like raucous. You're going to get loads of gain out of it. But it's got a low HFE. Now this would be interesting to use in a fuzz because it's so high gain but with a low leakage. Oh man, I'm torn here. I mean, these two would make a great fuzz pedal. So then my thinking goes, what can I use that would be different to what I've done in the past? You've seen me build germanium Rangemasters, loads of them on this channel. The treble booster is my favourite effect, so of course I've built loads of them. So I thought maybe we could go down a route of a vintage silicon PNP transistor. And for that, I've got this Texas Instruments. It's a BC213C. I like them because it's like got the Irish flag colours on the back. I don't know if it'll focus, probably not. No. So anyway, the 3 little colour marks on the back, they're on all these old Texas Instruments transistors. They do mean something, and I have looked into it, but I can't actually remember. So these sound great in Rangemasters. The more high gain, great English, Joe. They are higher gain. They have more gain. I'm mixing 2 types of sentences together there. Well done. And because they're silicon, they don't have any leakage. So it's a PNP silicon transistor. Remember, although this pedal we're building now is a 9-volt center negative, the same as any other pedal that you buy, it does have a PNP transistor in the Rangemaster side. We're not going to do any flipping of the phase, any flipping over negative to positive, any of that jazz. It just works the way it works. So this thing has a 372 HFE, so that's a massive amount of gain. And then, of course, just to show you, it doesn't have any leakage because silicon doesn't leak, which is why, funnily enough, we moved from germanium in the first place. Because why do you want a leaky transistor that goes out of tolerance after time in something like hospital equipment? And after all, that's what transistors were invented for. So really, I'm thinking about using this. It's raucous. I know it's going to clean up well because I've used them in the past. That rough edge is kind of good for 70s rock, 70s blues, which is also Paul Kossoff's tone. I mean, I like the Free Live in Granada Studios gig. That's like my favourite ever recorded guitar tone. And he's playing my favourite ever type of Les Paul. A dark bass plain top that's been faded back. Fantastic. Anyway, I digress. So the question is, do I use this one, which I'm really tempted by, or do I use this? Now this is my absolute creme de la creme favourite transistor I have in stock right now. And believe me, I've got some NKT 275s as well. I prefer this. This is a General Elec. I mean, the code on the side is 4JX1D7. And then crucially, the next number is 65, which means that this is a 1965 germanium from General Elec. It's got a black body. These come out of old organs. I reclaimed a ton of them from an old organ after a family member passed, sadly enough. So let's see what's going on with this one. I'm so tempted to use this because I think I've got 8 of these left when I had like 100. I'm gutted that they're gone. So if anyone owns a pedal with these in, congratulations, I'll never have them again. Well, I hope I do, but I don't think I will. So this is a PNP germanium transistor. Yep, we know that. Gives us our pin out. Current gain, 95. So that's right bang in the middle of where everyone would love to have a Rangemaster. 95, great. For me, I normally like to have it a bit lower. I like between 40 and 50, just because it's more trebly and more squawky, whatever. But anyway, 95, so it's lower than our other ones. And our current leak is 60 odd. 60 odd is perfect. It's the lowest leakage out of all the germaniums. I knew it would be. So the choice is between these two. Now, I'd like you to let me know in the comments if this was your pedal. And bear in mind, I'm building 4 of them. They'll all be for sale when this video goes live. In fact, if you've watched this far through, they're probably gone. But either way, which one would you have chosen to go in your pedal? The raucous silicon or the vintage rare germanium? I'll be honest though, if I was to blindfold someone and plug in 2 pedals that are identical but with these 2 transistors, I'd be willing to bet that people would prefer the tone of a silicon over the tone of a germanium. I really do think that. Most people. When most people think about tone, what they're really describing is silicon. I tell you what we can do. Because I really don't want to cross over legs, i.e. it needs to be emitter base collector in order. I know that that doesn't cross over legs, but let's just check this one again because I didn't look. And if I have to cross the legs over on this one, I'm just sacking it off and I'll go with the germanium. See, what I would normally do if I were making a video is I would build this and then tack in each of these transistors in turn and have a listen to them and decide later on. But let's see. Oh, wait there, I've gone past it. Of course I have. So red is the collector, blue is the base, and green is the emitter. So it would just go that way round. I'm going with the germanium. Fall into peer pressure. Right, I know that with this germanium, the little tab should be the emitter, but I'm just going to check it because the red dot on the silver body ones is the collector, usually. Bearing in mind it was people in a factory making these, so there's no guarantees there. But let's just have a look. As we can see, we've got our pinout is the emitter is the red one, which is the one with our tab, as I said. The blue is the base, which is the center one. And the green is the collector, which is this end one. Perfect. And our tags, we're going to have collector, base, emitter. So as per here, collector, base, emitter. So as long as it goes in this way round, I know we're good. Now, if you're going to be building more than just one pedal, if you're going to build a few and you think you're going to use germanium, you really should get one of them DCA 55s. Now, I've got them available through an Amazon affiliates link. I do get a little kickback, to be fair. It does help the show with no extra charge to yourself. I must admit, I'm getting bored of saying that. So I may just stop mentioning all of that. And then if you want the stuff in my videos, you could just look in the description. Right, if we put it in, I'm putting it in the center tags. You could go down the ends, but then you've got this going into one of them. The trick here is just to solder in the collector in this end bit here. So if we wet the tip, well, hey, just solder this collector in first. The reason being is you don't want to be reaching over all your components or your trim pot to get in and solder the other legs in. And you don't want to be soldering your transistor in before anything else because it doesn't like heat. So why subject it to more heat? But if we solder this one leg in and flip it over, once it's straightened up, you can actually get to the legs at the bottom and just go through these holes here, fill up the hole, and that's usually the leg soldered in, like so. There. Now there is one other thing to do. So the positive side of this capacitor, which is pin 1, needs to be joined to the positive side of this capacitor, which is pin 4. Now you could do it when you're wiring up. You put like the live into this one and then run it round and it attaches to this one. Great, no danger doing that. However, I'm going to do it underneath the board. So I'm going to go from this tag here to this tag here under the board. Now you could do it with a solid core wire if you want, but I'm not going to. I'm going to do it with some of my silicone wire, which is easily the best wire to work with. I mean, look at this. You strip the ends with your snips, no problem at all. No messing with like wire strippers and anything like that. I used to use this this really thick military grade wire as a bloody. It was like heat proof for use on board. Well, basically, I think what it is when it goes on fire, it doesn't give off like smoke that kills people, like non-toxic smoke or whatever which is probably one of the biggest killers in a fire on board, like if you get hit by something. But it was a nightmare to strip. It was just so much work. So I'm going to tack that in place on that side. I know you don't tack solder things, but and then I'm going to slot it through the gap on this side and just give it a little solder. Push it in. There we go. And then it shouldn't have poked through too much. No, it hasn't. But I have left a bit of leg on there that I don't want to. There's our Rangemaster side completely finished. Let's move on to the costs. Paul Rogers once said of Paul's tone that nobody could touch him in feel and soul. Well, I completely agree. And that's why I'm using all Mojo components in my FreeRange pedals, because I really want to capture the soul and mojo of Paul's tone, even if I'll never be able to play like that. Speaking of the FreeRange, how did that name come about? Well, a friend of mine suggested that I make the Kossoff Drive and I should put the Rangemaster and the Kossoff Drive in the same box, because they were both the pedals that I was using most on my board, and I'm really a massive Free fan. So Free for the band and Range for the Rangemaster. FreeRange. Ha! I thought it was a perfect name. What do you think? And now we're on to the Kossoff Drive. So if we take a look at our drawing, we can see that in the first two lugs, we've got this weird arrangement of a 47 PF capacitor and a 1 meg resistor. So that is these two bits here. We've got our 47 PF capacitor and our 1 meg resistor. I'm just going to give the legs a little bit of a clean on this. And I'm going to refer to the tags now as this left-hand side tag as tag 1 and this end tag as tag 8, just because I'm used to thinking of it in them terms with the Kossoff Drive. Now, this this capacitor, well done, Joe, has really thin legs, and this resistor is like super thick, it's heavy duty. So I'm going to use the resistor legs to go through the tags, and with the cap, I'm just going to line the two bodies of them up together like this, and then I'm going to wrap the cap leg around the resistor. I mean, you could just run them both going into the tags because they're going into the same tags, but I'm just going to do this for this one to save a bit of space. And then if I solder them in place, if I can ever get any solder on there, well done, Joe. There. All we have to do is snip off our capacitor legs, the excess bits, we don't need them. And then we can fit that. There's a few ways of fitting these. Now, I could raise it up in the same way that we've done these caps. I'm not going to do that. We could lie it on its side so we can see both components, or we could sit it up so then the cap's on the top. Sonically, I don't think this makes any difference whatsoever, but I'd be interested to know if you think it does. I am going to lie them on the side just so then people can see that I've got both components there, because they're both rather nice and expensive components. or relatively expensive, should we say. So if we put that in place, now I can solder just this bottom end in, like so. Next up, we're moving on to a 1K resistor. And if you look at our drawing, we can see it goes from tag 1 in the top row down to tag 2 in the bottom row. And there isn't anything else that goes into these tags, so we can solder the both halves straight in. Now on this, we have 3 1K resistors. And I am building 4 of these pedals, remember? So there's going to be another 3 after this one that will all be on sale, funnily enough, on my website. But I chose these high precision 1K resistors. So they're 1.07K. They are ridiculously accurate and are rather expensive. So I had to find 12 of them, which is a fun fact. You don't have to use the same resistor for every position, but I just wanted to. So this one's going to go from the top tag on tag 1, which we didn't solder in, down to tag 2. I can't remember which resistors I used for my Koss build last time. I should have really gone back and watched that before I started this. I did read a lot of the comments to try and see if I could answer the questions in the comments this time round, but most of it was just people asking for schematics. Oh, what's it based on? Well, heaven forbid you come up with your own way of wiring some JFETs together to make a tone, eh? Anyway, next up we've got 2 components going into the second tag along on the top row. It's a bit of an awkward bit, this one. So on our drawing, you can see we've got 220 PF and a 1 NF. So our 1 NF is this cap here. It's an LCR cap, a not new old stock one, NOS. So this is going to go up and it attaches to our JFET leg. Fine. We'll put that in second. And then we've got this 240 PF cap. Well, instead of that, I've got a 180 PF cap. It's another one of them high precision components. So this one is super high precision and rather expensive. The reason why I'm going for 180 PF instead of 220, this is it's a coupling cap, this one, but it's a real good position to add in a bit of top end. So rather than filtering out more, it's going to filter out less. So this will give it a bit more top end. And that's because we're going after Koss's tone, yeah, fine. But also we've got the Rangemaster in there, and that's going to real thump the hell out of this. And usually when you add more gain, it tends to get a little bit darker. So this is going to be my way of mitigating that. Now to add this one in, I'm going to use the old flat edge method with my Nipex snips. So use them as a spacing tool and bend it over. Now the reason why I'm starting with the 220 PF, or in our case 180 PF cap, when this is second, is because this is going to go in both tags. So it's going into the second tag in the top row and third tag in the bottom row. And we can actually solder it into the bottom row because nothing else is going in there. So if we get that in place, roughly in the center, and then solder in this bottom row, that'll keep it, a bit more in than that. That'll keep it in place, which is ideal, really. You can snip off the excess and, if I never get it out, and then straighten up our capacitor. Probably should have gone that way a little bit. But once we've done that, we can move on to this cap. Now this cap is going to be floating until towards the end when we add in our JFETs. So that's why I've added this second, is to clean the legs because it is rather old. Right, so that's going to go into the same leg. Now I like to try and get the LCR logo at the top, just because, what can I say, I'm vain and I like brand names. And this cap, if we look at our drawing, it goes in between the second and third tags. So here, second and third tags is where this leg has got to poke out, if you like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend this back leg over and then bend it back on itself. Remembering we've got loads of space above us because of the shape of our enclosure. You might not. it's worth taking that into account. So if you're buying these caps specifically for this, you might want to choose something low profile for this bit. You can use literally any 1NF cap. Right, so it's sitting up a little bit, and I'm going to put this leg here resting between the second and third tags, and then I can solder this in. Next up, we're going between the third tag along on the top row and a fourth tag along on the bottom row. If we take a look at our drawing, we can see that we've got a 1K and a 47 microfarad, 47 UF. So we know that our 1Ks are these high precision, you can't bend it, military spec, excellence resistors. What are we going to use for our 47 microfarad? Last time I did this build, I used a big old cap, and it was fancy and all of that. This time, I'm going to use this. It's a Samsung capacitor, funnily enough. I do believe it was meant for a television set or the like. It's not going to get that now. And I'm going to do the same method as before, where I wrap them round. So I'm just going to bend these capacitor legs out, and it's going to wrap around our resistor. Just because the resistor legs are a bit better quality, because, well, the resistor is better quality than this, I would have thought, because of what it is. I'm not going to be able to wrap them round, actually, because there's not that much leg there. Rest the resistor on the top of one of the legs. I can just give it a little tack solder. Tack solder. I need a t-shirt with that on. Untactful solder, if you want to call it that. And then I can straighten out the legs, which is not all that straight at the minute, I've got to say. Straighten out the legs, and then I can solder the other side in. Now, if you want, you can run both your capacitor and your resistor straight through the tags. You don't have to do this. I'm just doing it because, well, because. I didn't want them to sit side by side. I'm quite happy with the cap sitting over the top of the resistor. Now, this is the point. Our capacitor is polar, as we know. So the negative side needs to go towards the third tag in the top row, and the positive side towards the fourth tag in the bottom row. So we slot that in there. Give this side a snip. Now, there is nothing else that's going into these two legs, so we can solder them both in, which is always my favourite. Of course it's fell over. Handy thing about using this small 47 microfarad cap is it's not going to get in the way of our next cap, which is a coupling cap, and in my opinion my favourite cap to add into this pedal, because it's a 2000 volt Sprague cap. I've bought every single one of these from the supplier that I had, so there's no more. I've just got one bag, and I'm slowly seeing them go down, and there isn't all that many left. Did have enough to do one for each of these pedals, so all four of these will have one of these in, and actually all four of them are going to have exactly the same components in. This is way too big to fit through the tags, so if we look at our drawing, we can see it's going in a 1, 2, 3, 4th tag along in the top row, and it's not attaching to a tag in the bottom row. It's actually going to attach to our J-FET. So what we're going to do is make sure the Sprague is pointing upwards, because that's pretty damn cool. Bend one leg over, bend it in on itself like we did before for our electrolytic cap, and bend it back round on itself, and slot it through this tag right here. You want it to sit in the centre of the tagboard, like lengthways, because this capacitor I'm using is rather long. I imagine you won't use one quite so ridiculous. Now I was just about to solder that in, but if we look at our drawing, we can see that there is also a 10k resistor coming out of that slot in the top row. So I'm using this 10k resistor. I've got about 5 of these left as well. I really do need to start stocking up on some components. or at least go through the massive pile of unsorted components I've got and restock my drawers. I need to find a bit of motivation for that, because that's like literally the most boring part of pedal building. So if you slot that in there, it's going to go to the next tag along on the bottom row. And we can't solder the bottom row in because there's more to go in there. So we can only solder this top one. Being careful not to burn our expensive capacitor. Very nearly did then. Then we can sit that upright. Now the leg on this is absolutely massive. We don't need that much hanging off the board while we're trying to work. So I'll snip that off. But look at the length of that. I'll be saving that for the future thing, of course. Now, the next component in is a 100k resistor. This is the only resistor in this that I haven't like really splashed out on. So this is a rather cheap half a watt 100k resistor. The reason being is it's got to slide under all of this, and usually when I'm building this pedal I'm using massive components all the way through into paint to slide it in, and I ain't got that many 100k resistors left, to be fair. So this one's going straight up and down on the board. We can't solder the top tag in because we've got another resistor coming out of that. So let's just solder the bottom tag in, which is our 100k resistor and our 10k. Now we're on to the last resistor in this little chain of 3 resistors. It's a 1k resistor. So we've got this right here. Again, it's the last of our high precision resistors. I'd love to know if people are building this, if you're using these type of high precision resistors and stuff in your build. That would be really interesting to know. Now this is going to go from the top of that 100k resistor to the next tag along on the bottom row, like so. Now we can solder both ends of this in now. There's nothing else going in there. It's always easier. I've been struggling to get under that cap when I've been soldering. Really could just turn this on its side and I can reach both. Yeah, I really am interested to know if people build these with expensive parts or cheaper parts. And I mean, let's face it, if you're building it with vintage parts, it's harder to do because vintage parts are just harder to work with. They're awkward sizes. You have crud on the legs that you've got to clean off and stuff. Sounds like nothing, but they are awkward to work with. Whereas newer components are nice and easy. So it's interesting to see what people choose. Now, if we look at our drawing, we can see the next bit. We've got our final JFET, the link to that on the board, which is going to be with a jumper. And remember that leg that we cut off our 2000 volt cap? Well, this is where it's going to come in handy, hopefully. Straight off that. Now, also going in there is a 1 microfarad, a 1 UF cap. Now, usually I use a big non-polar cap, make a big statement of it. However, this time, just to be different, I'm going to use this JB cap. It's a 1 UF. It is polar as well. I'm just using it because it'll fit in the center of the board, and that's what I wanted to do. So to use this one now, I'm going to use my Nipex flat nose pliers as ever as a spacer to bend the legs over. And if we look at our drawing, we can see that the negative side of this is going to go into the top row. So now if we count from the right hand side this time, it's the third from the right hand side tag is going to be our negative. And the second from the right hand side is going to be our positive. So actually if I slide the positive leg in first, it means that I won't have to snip anything. And we can just lie that over a sec. Oh, that's a bad idea. Lie it over in the middle a sec while we get ready to see if this is long enough. So this is going to fit right between them 2 tags, and I can see that it's going to reach. You want to make sure it's going to reach our JFET leg, otherwise there's no point in being there. So we're soldering in the link wire and the 1 microfarad electrolytic for that tag. And then snip off the excess. Then we can straighten up our cap. Brilliant. Lift up our link wire. Brilliant. That's all done. Now this is where it starts getting a little bit congested. So if we look at our drawing, we've got two 15k resistors, bit of an odd value really, and a 2.2 NF cap. We'll do the cap last. Both resistors go into the last tag along, helpful. And one resistor goes into the tag where our 1 microfarad cap has just gone in, and then obviously into the last tag like we just said. There's two ways of doing this, and I do it either way depending on how I'm building or how I feel that day. And each way has a compromise. So the first compromise is our second resistor is going to be sitting across this way here, which means there isn't much space in the middle. So our first resistor could go lying underneath the second resistor on the tag board like that. Or you could fit it between these holes in the center here, no problem. But then it's kind of in the way of our JFET, which is going to be stood up here. It's sort of in that area. I'm going to do the second way this time and put it in the outside holes just because, well, I am doing that. Normally, if I use a large 1 microfarad cap, that goes in the outside hole, so it makes that really difficult. But because I'm not using one this time, I might as well utilize them holes. So the only cap I can basically disregard anything going into there and solder in that 1 microfarad now, because the 15k resistor isn't going in there. Look at that. And now the other 15k resistor is going from the second tag along in the top row from this end to the first tag in this end. Great. And now we can solder this top row because nothing else is going into there. And now this bottom row is going to have this, a 2.2 NF cap. I've got this rather old blue drop SRC cap. It's kind of like a Mullard mustard cap, only made by someone else in blue. Pretty good. They're not very accurate, these, as you can, I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but they're 10% accuracy. So you really do need to test these because they're not going to be what you think every single time. Right, so I'm doing the same bendy method because this cap is too big to fit between the two tags. Of course it is. And nothing else goes in these, so you can solder it straight in. This video is going to be an absolutely long one just because I'm basically doing two pedals in one, Rangemaster and Kossoff Drive, hence the FreeRange name. But because of that, it's going to be a longer video. I'd love to know what you guys think of longer videos. I had one person comment telling me, keep your videos to 8 minutes, make them more concise, all of this stuff. And I was like, well, that's kind of not the point of my videos. I like to go into depth. I feel like I'm just sat here talking to myself, if not building a pedal. I'd rather have the camera on, and then at least I'm talking to my best friend, which is a lens. I'd love to know what you guys think. Would you like the shorter version or what have you? I do put chapters on there because then if people get bored, they can just skip through on the chapters. Right, now that's in place, we're going to move to the off-board wiring, which is our outside edges. And for this, we've got a load of link wires in the top row for our earths, ground, earth, whatever. And then on this row here, we've got the 15k resistor that we didn't put in before. So to put that in, I'm just going to do the old Ibanez method of bending it over on itself. I know it's not done by Ibanez, it's just that they did it on the tube screamer pedals. But I'm going to keep calling it that anyway. Now when I'm situating this, I'm going to put the body of the resistor this side, out the way of where my JFET's going to go. And then we'll just solder in this end. Speaking of which, stick around because the JFETs, I'm going to add in a little tweak to this one that wasn't on my regular Kossoff Drive build. There. Straighten that up. Now we're just on to the earths. So normally I like to use solid core wire for the earths. However, because it's joining up with our Rangemaster pedal, I'm going to wire them underneath the board. You might think why, and that's because I want to run it right the way over to where it joins this pedal here. So our earth is the third tag along on the bottom row for our Rangemaster. So all I'm going to do is just skin some wire, give it a tin, and again this is why this wire is so good, because you can tin it like on demand. And then if I wet the tip, I can heat up this joint here and just slot the wire in. There. If the solder joint's no good, you can always go around and touch that up later on. So first of all, if we look at our drawing, wow, just burn me. Well, I always burn my fingers. If we look at our drawing, we can see that on the top row, there's 3 link wires. One goes into the first tag, then it skips a tag and goes in again, skips a tag and goes in again, and then skips 2 tags and goes in the end. This wire here needs to link up with that first tag, which is this tag here, where we put our 47 cap into. So if I just measure that across, I can snip this here and strip it, fine. Now what you could do at this point is give this a solder, so then it's a solid core, and stick it straight through the tag, and then strip this wire, do the same again, and stick it through the tag, fine, no problem. Or you can push the 2 wires together so they're even, and then give them a twist round so they become 1 wire, then tin it, and then you're just pushing 1 wire through. Either way gives you the exact same result, just in a different manner. So I look from the top to make sure that I'm going into the tag that has my my 47 PF cap and my 1 meg resistor, because if you get the wrong one, you're going to earth out something that you really need in the circuit. Right, now I know that that's in there. This is the important one, the starting point, because once this is in place, you can just count them from the bottom and you know you're going to be right. But if you get this in the wrong place, every single one is going to be wrong. And because it's under the board, it's going to be a nightmare to rectify later on. So it's definitely worth just double, triple, quadruple checking that. Right, there's our first tag there that we're in. Double check. Yes, it's the one there. Great.
And that is all I have to say about the FreeRange from Hello Sailor Effects. Thanks, Joe, for sending this. I was going to swear, but I can't swear. Effing amazing pedal. Please go and check this out, because it sounds wicked.
Next up is the JFETs. So if you've watched my Kossoff Drive video before, you'll know that I like to use these J113s. They're a little bit brighter sounding than the J201s that most people use in their drive pedals. And same with the 2M5457s. These tend to be a little bit brighter. The lower gain too, which is why I like them in the Kossoff Drive. However, for this one I wanted it to be just a little bit different. A little bit more aggressive. A little bit more 70s rock. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to add in a J201 in a Q2 position. So the second transistor along on this circuit is going to be a J201. But you can't find reliable J201s these days. You just can't. So I'm going to use this. This is from my buddies over at 5 Cats Pedals. So what they do is they take an SMD J201 and they solder it to their little daughter board, which has the drain source gate labelled on it. You can buy these little boards yourself and solder the transistors on. You can use any transistors. I mean, on the back it's labelled collector base emitter. However, for me, I just buy them straight from them with this soldered on because my eyesight's terrible. To use it though, we're going to have to attach some legs. And to attach the legs, I want them to all be the same width and basically the same length. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these. If you watch my Eddie Van Halen phaser video lately, you'll know that I had a load of resistors left over from that Fuzzdog kit Well, I'm just going to clip the legs off them. So I've got 3 component legs that are the same width and roughly the same length. Not that the length really matters. In fact, the length doesn't matter at all. Wait there, thinking about it, I actually don't even need 3, I only need 2. Oops. So, first things first is to check the pin out of our J113 to make sure we get this the right way round. Because the leg that attaches to our floating capacitor, so the leg that attaches to this floating capacitor, I'm going to leave with no leg going through that hole, so I can just slot it on like so. I think it's that way round there, and then solder it in place. So I need to find out which way round the drain, source and gate go on this. So the best way to do that is by hitting up our good friends on Google, and all I do is type in J201, and you can see here it actually comes with J201 pin out on the screen. So I'll tap that and it brings up loads and loads of drawings. The first one we come to, if I bring that up, we can see here that J201, 1 on the left hand side. So if we've got our transistor facing us, the flat face, number 1, which is the side that we want for our capacitor connection, is the drain. Okay, so 1 is the drain, and that's the side that we really want to attach to that end. So if we move that to the side, I know that the drain is this one here because it says D on it. So my legs are going to be attached to the source and the gate. I hope I'm making sense here, and if I'm not making sense and you think, what are you talking about, Joe? Please let me know in the comments and I'll endeavour to elaborate. Or I'll do a whole video on the JFET pinouts. One or the other. So right now I've got component legs going through the source and the gate, because the drain is going to attach to our capacitor. Now if we lie that down, all I have to do is solder them in place. This is a little bit fiddly. I'm not a massive fan of SMD components at the best of times anyway. There you go. Both of them are soldered in. Now we can take our flat nose snips, flat nose pliers, and just straighten them legs out. Like so. Perfect. And then clip the excess off on the front, being sure to steer clear of our drain on that side. Now I'll fit this in a second, but to fit all of our JFETs, we're going to need to do a little bit of work to them. So the JFETs go with the flat side of the face facing the pedal. Same with J201s and J113s because they have the same pin out. The first 2 legs just need to be spread out a little bit so they'll fit in the tags, and I do that by spreading the end leg out a little bit. The next leg, this drain leg, if I take a bite about 4 mil down, 3 mil down, and bend it upwards so you're getting that sort of shape there. The reason why I'm doing that is because that's going to attach to our capacitor leg, if you like. All I do is these 2 legs here, and make sure they're the same length by snipping a tiny bit off the center leg. Now they're sitting at the same height. This is going to go in the first 2 tags of our tag board, and I put it through the center holes. You could put it through these end tags here. It doesn't really matter, but I put it through the center holes. I try and sit it as straight as it's going to be, and just solder the end leg in like that. Now once the end leg's in, we can straighten up our transistor or our FET, move our capacitor around so then it's like out of the way and not tucked under and all this jazz like it was just then. Let's see. So then you get a good connection through these legs, but bearing in mind that next couple of tags along we're going to have another transistor or JFET, whatever you want to call it, going in there. So you don't really want to be in the way of that. And then solder them 2 together. Brilliant. Now we can make sure it's the right height. And rather than trying to squeeze in and get my iron in here, all I'm going to do is just flip the board over. And I can see that the the JFET leg is sticking out the bottom here, so I can just solder it from this side. Done. And there's Q1 in place. Now, why did I choose Q2 to add for our J201 and not Q1? Well, Q1, basically, the way that I set it, doesn't add a lot of gain to the pedal. It's more like a buffery type thing, a buffer phase, an input phase, if you like. I don't create much gain with this one. So, there's no point in putting the J201, which is a real gainy JFET, and, you know, what's the point in putting that in where there isn't much gain created? So I'm going to put it in Q2 because the gain control is just right on this, the gap between the the J113 in Q1 and the J201 in the Q2 position. So really, it's the most effect on gain out of all of the FETs, which is why I'm using it for this bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to slide it through this hole with our 22 NF cap. Now I can see that this is going to go into these two tags here, this one and this one. So what I want to do is make sure that the center leg is the right height when I bend it. So if I line it up, take it out with my flat nose snips, I can bend that leg over. Brilliant. That's ready to go in. This first leg needs to be bent out a little bit, so then it's going to go into the tag. And then I just simply bend it over at the same height as our first one. And now if I snip them a little bit short, like so, you don't have to, but you can, it means that I'm going to skewer it onto our capacitor first, like so, and then push it through the two holes there at the end. And what I want to do is make sure that it's going to sit even. So I'll solder that center leg in. And then I can straighten up the FET. So then it's sitting square to the board. Brilliant. And solder up this leg here. Right, now that's all square. I can now solder the cap that is going through our board. I can solder that in. Good. If you are going to use J201s, if you haven't got a reliable source for them, don't buy them off eBay. Don't buy them off Amazon. You're not getting real ones. I would 100% go to 5Cats pedals and get some of these. You could put them in all three positions. It'd be amazing. You'll get an awesome gainy pedal. Brilliant. And now we're on to our last JFET. I'm going to fit that in the same manner as I fitted the first one. Only the floating capacitor, instead of it being this LCR one, is going to be this jumper right here. For the filter board, what are you going to need? Well, you're going to need all of this. You'll need our standard two 390 ohm resistors or one 1K resistor. You'll need a 100 NF cap and a 100 microfarad cap. That's our standard power filter that I use in every single one of my builds. But for the Kossoff drive, you need these 10K trim pots, 3 of them, one for each JFET, funnily enough. In fact, the J201 is going to require a 100K trim pot, so one of these is going to have to change. I'm using the vintage trim pot for the J201. That's going to mess up my spacing a little bit, I think. We'll see. Now, as for this board is going to be as big as you need it to be. And that's a terrible answer, but that's what it is. So instead of doing the lines going across the board, the copper strips like we would normally do, we do them coming up and down. That's one thing to note. It needs to be as wide as you can squeeze in 3 trim pots. And then it also needs to be as deep as you can get in to put the trim pots in and then put this stuff behind it. So first things first, we'll add in our first trim pot. What I like to do is go 1 row back from the front because the front row is going to have some of our wire going in. So this is going to go in the first 3 tags. There. And then we just bend the legs over to keep it in place while we work and work out the measurements and stuff. Done. Then same with this one. This one's going to go right at the other side because this is going to be for our Q3 JFET. It's doing the same job. It's just biasing it, letting the 9 volts into it to get it to bias right there. Now handily, another one of them would have gone in the middle if I was using J113s, but now I'm using 100 100K resistor. The problem is this thing stretches right the way back down here, and I need that space really for my other parts, but needs must. These parts are going to stretch between the two outside edges. So it's going to stretch between this tag here and this tag here. But we don't want them, or we don't want our earth sides, which is going to be this side, to touch this. So we have to split the track. The easiest way to split the track is just with a Stanley blade. Just go in and make a circular motion with the tip of the blade in the track, and that'll create a hole. I know other builders use like a handy little handheld drill bit and they just twist it in there. Great, if that works for you, that's fine, but I prefer to use a Stanley blade. Must be a Liverpool thing, I think. Right, so that's our negative side. Now our positive side, what's going to happen is our power, or our 9 volts, is going to come into this row here, and we want it to come up and touch this, our first part of our trim pot. The centre of this trim pot is going to go out to the JFET. Centre of this trim pot is going to go to the JFET. Centre of this trim pot is going to go to the JFET. What we need to do is join all of these first legs together. So that first leg, with that first leg, with that first leg. And the best way to do that is to use link wires, which we're going to do in a second. But first of all, I'm going to solder all of these in place. Our 3 trim pots are now soldered in. We've got our break here to stop the negative half from touching what we're going to solder in this side. Well, actually, just to be safe, I'm going to put a break in the next tag along, and then same again on this side. I'm going to break the next couple of tags along here, just to stop any of these trim pots from touching any of the caps that we're going to put in. So to do that, I'm going to take our Stanley blade again and just do the next one along. The one tag that I don't want to cut is this first row here. The rest of them can be cut as long as it's this side of the components. But that first tag, we need that to carry the 9 volts across. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've cut all these out and then realise that I've cut the tag that's meant to supply the 9 volts. And actually, I don't realise until it's in the pedal and I'm not getting any voltage to the JFETs. So we're going to go the second tag along for this one. The reason why we're cutting more of them out is there's only so many holes here, and we've got 2 resistors to go in, 2 capacitors to go in, and a link wire. So there isn't enough to fit all of them in. So I might have to land some of them into this row here and just join them together. But you'll see that as I go. So we know this is our live side, and in our live side we're going to need one of these resistors. And this is going to be for the power coming from our 9 volt jack down to hit the pedal. Goes through this resistor first. So I like to do a little hook at the top and then push it through the end here. In fact, we'll go closer up. Push it through the end. Oh, we'll go here maybe. There, like so. Brilliant. Then, if we think about it, the power's got to come out of here because it's filter power and go to the Rangemaster side of our pedal. So we're going to need another one of these. And that also attaches to the same 9 volt rail. You'll see exactly how this goes in when we wire up the pedal. But for now, you'll just have to believe me that we need another one. And I can go in there. And as you can see, the end of this is already super congested. I'm just going to solder them in place to keep them where they are. So that's our 9 volt in for the whole pedal, and our 9 volt out for our Rangemaster. our nicely filtered 9V out. Now we need these two caps to go in. So these caps are going to go from this end, which is going to be our earth connection. We'll add a wire in there to connect it to earth. We're going to bend this cap out, the two legs, so it stretches over, and it's going to sit right in the middle like so. So one leg is going to go through here. We can bend that. Like that. If I can ever get it through the damn hole. And the next leg is going to go to the second row along the row behind the split that we did just before. I mean, you don't have to bend them exactly, but a rough guesstimate is preferable. So the second row along through there. And this cap can just slot in like so. And because I've left this leg a little bit longer, we can bend that over to join into our 9V. So then when we solder it, solder the earth side in, and then solder this side in, and then go ahead and solder it to this too. Brilliant. That means that our cap is now going to be connected to earth this end, and the live this side, and this cap's going to filter out the lighter bits of noise, like the less rippled noise, if you like. Then we're going to add in this cap, our 100 microfarad cap. Again, this one's going to filter out larger noise, if you like. I have explained this in other videos, so I won't go through it again. But the negative side, remember, the negative side of this cap, because it's polar, is going to have to go to negative, which is this right hand side. And the positive side is going to attach in with our resistors and our positive. We don't have to bend the leg of this one over anymore, because it is of course joined to our 9V now. So we can situate there like that, and then just solder these two legs in. That's all of the components on our board for our filter. The only things left to do is we need a wire for our negative. I'm going to put it a bit longer because I don't actually know where I'm going to run it through this enclosure. Strip it and tin it. And that's going to connect to the negative side of our capacitors. Like so. Doesn't matter which hole it goes through, as long as it's not attached to any of our pots and it is attached in the same copper trace as our negative halves of our capacitors, like that. There. Now, to attach this to our JFETs, we're going to attach the center lug, so that lug there on this one, and the center lug of these two, to our JFET itself. So we're going to need 3 wires. Don't know how long I'm going to need them, because I've got to get it all in the pedal first, which means that I'm doing them way longer than I need. Absolutely way longer. I know it's a bit of a waste, but this is just the way to do it. Of course you could measure it out, but what happens if your plan changes and now your wire isn't as long? You move where you're going to situate this in your pedal. That's awkward. That means that you've got to like lengthen a wire or take the whole thing out and replace it. It's not for me. I'll just run them a bit longer in the first place. Right, now with all of them tinned, I'm going to go into the center pin of each of these trim pots. So that's that one there for this one. This center one is going to be right in between the 2 legs, which is this one here. And then when we turn it over, we can see it's in line with this, with the center pin. We're basically wiring these up as variable resistors. There. And then solder them in place. And this is all of our boards complete now. The only thing left to do on this side, which I do with all of my variable builds, or strip boards, whatever you want to call it, is run a Stanley blade down the centre of the traces to make sure nothing's connected to something that shouldn't. Now, of course, some of these traces are joined together, so that won't matter. Like this one here is joined there. There you go. And there's the board. We've got our negative, we've got our 9-volt input, our 9-volt output to our Rangemaster, and then each of our JFETs. The two J201s on the outside, no, sorry, the two J113s on the outside, and the centre one for the J201. Eric Clapton once said of Paul's tone that he had an amazing touch, a perfect vibrato that you just couldn't copy. Well, that's what I'm aiming for today, is to add a little bit of mojo into my tone, because I know I can't play like that. I haven't got them skills, these hands can't do that. But they can make magic with the soldier and and I'm going to show you just how to do that. The goal of this pedal isn't to clone Paul's tone, because I know, just like you, that that's impossible. The goal is to put us in a ballpark of that sound at bedroom levels, and then we can add a little bit of mojo to our playing. This is all of our parts in the enclosure. To me, it's looking pretty good, but rather congested. We're only just about making it in the enclosure in some bits. I've went ahead and fit my two LEDs here. Our 9-volt filter board is down here with our 3 wires coming off that go to our JFETs. The centre one being the one that goes to our J201. And we've got our earth here, or our negative, our ground, whatever you want to call it. Brilliant. I mean, this thing, well, let's take a look. This is what it looks like on top. So we've got our bronze leather. This has been lacquered over the top, the bronze leather as well. Just, I don't know, it just gives it a nice shine I really like. And underneath, we have our paisley. Looks good. We've got gold washers. I know some people don't like the gold washers, but I think they look really good on this one. And also a gold ring around our three position EQ switch for the Rangemaster. So how's it going to look? We've got Rangemaster boost and then EQ here, and then a Kossoff drive this side. It is congested, really hard to get in there. The circuit's held in with a combination of the usual sticky foam pads, which is these things here. If you're interested in these, I'll put a link in the description to these, and if you want to get them, that's fantastic. It is an Amazon affiliates link, so I do get a small kickback. Anyway, I couldn't build pedals without them. They're fantastic. I've got them and some steel reinforced epoxy. So where to start with this? Firstly, I like to get rid of all these wires because they're kind of in the way. And where do they go? So let me show you. They go to the floating leg on our transistor on our JFET. So this first wire is going to go to the J201 here, to this one. The middle wire is going to go to our, sorry, that's a J113. The middle one's going to go to our J201, to the end tag here, the one that's straight in with this cap. And then this end one is going to go to this one here. You could with this end one, and I'm going to probably, I always do, is run that round and go to this tag on the back here. So third from the right hand side, because there's no components here, it's just a floating link wire. You can go into this tag here. Just makes life easy. But I'm going to go ahead and start with this here. And all I'll do is, because basically the way that this is, it's going to be really difficult to run wires around this thing. It's just too congested. So the wires are going to go straight down the middle and straight along this front here. That's going to be my wiring loom. So these here are going to come to the center and then go up to this. And same with these, just the way I'm going to run it. So the first one is going to be our Q1, which is a J113, as I said. And all I like to do is get the wire so then it's roughly making the leg on our capacitor, hitting this LCR cap, the leg on the 1NF cap. And then I can skin the wire and give it a tin, as so. Now with our snips, what we can do, and I have shown this a billion times before, is halfway down the strip bit, if we just put our snips on and bend it into a hook, and then we can close it over with the snips on the outside afterwards. So then we've got just enough of a gap in there to hold on to the leg of our capacitor, and then you can thread it up. The issue is, while these are floating here, it's going to be hard work because it just is. They're in the way, and there's loads of stuff in the way. We're just going to have to deal with it. This is a congested build. I know this seems like a big enclosure, but to fit all of this in, it's just really not. Anyway. So once our wire is in, we can hook it on. Now you can crimp it down if you want, but this is one of the I always say crimp them down with your snips, just give them a squeeze. But I always crimp it too hard. It either deforms or it cut right through it. I do that all the time. So now I just don't bother. I just solder this one on. I know it's a bit lazy, but it is what it is. Here we have it. We've got our wires coming out of our filter board and down to our JFETs. Trim pot 1, wire goes to the Q1 position, J113. Trim pot 2, which if you remember was 100k trim pot instead of 10. That runs round to our J201. And then trim pot 3 goes underneath and up and to the third tag from this side, going to our link wire that goes up to the Q3 J113. And that's basically just the power supply going to each JFET. And we can control that on them trim pots, which we will do later. Stay tuned and I'll show you exactly how I tune these pedals. There's a specific way of doing it. Super interesting and really handy, by the way. I think if you're setting it to a voltage, like for example, if someone's saying to you, set it to 4.5 volts, that means absolutely nothing because all of these are different. Doesn't matter what the tolerances are. And that's not good enough. Not in my eyes anyway. So, yeah. Now, next up is this wire here. This is an earth wire. So, let's deal with the earths. Now, if you remember, we run earth wires underneath our board between the back here. There was a load of earths. And this side here, right here, the third pin from the right. So, as long as we touch one of them pins to this here, we should be good to go with earthing the whole board, both circuits. So what do we need to do? This is our earth for our filter board. I'm going to run that along and to the center pin of this tag here. No, I'm not. That's an absolute lie. I'm not. I changed my mind. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run it round, or I'll go down our wire and loom and I'll come up to the third tag along from the right hand side. This is the earth for our Rangemaster. I'll go into that tag there. And then out of that tag is going to come 2 wires splitting off and going to the center pin of each 3-pole double throw switch. That's the earth for our LEDs for these. Great. And another wire is going to come off, go underneath the board and come up and go through the earth connection on our 9-volt DC jack and go right the way across the top here as a buzz bar for any other earths, which will be from our pots and stuff. This is where things start getting a bit murky. It's a bit hard to keep track because we've got 2 pedals going on here. So our earths are all wired up, great. I'm leaving like the caps, I'm looking at these caps going to this switch to last just to give me a bit more space to move around. Now the question is, do I start with the Rangemaster because that's first in the circuit? My brain works that way. Or do I go with the Kossoff Drive because there's more to wire up? Choices. Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to go with the Rangemaster just because it's easy. So I'm going to go in order of signal chain first. On this bottom row, front left pin of our left hand 3-pole double throw switch, because this is going to be the first in the circuit. This front right hand pin here is going to come round the back and come up and attach to where this 5NF cap goes. Also though, another wire is going to come out and it's going to go under our board. The choices are, you can run it from the back of here. If I can bend that cap and get in there, can I? Maybe. Oh, I'll tell you what, this is another thing about doing this on the fly. This is right up against the switch. That's awkward. Yeah, so from here, it's going to go round and go to there. And I'm going to run another wire out of that round and to one of these 2 center pins of our toggle switch. Doesn't matter which one, you can kind of pick and choose. I'm going to choose the left hand side one because that represents the input to me. It seems to make sense. So we're going to have a wire coming out of here, meeting up with this green cap, and then of course we need to send one to our toggle switch. We've now attached our wire going from the front left hand side pin to all the connections I was saying before, our switch and our input to our Rangemaster circuit. I did, however, add in this little extra line here going to the center tag on the back here of our 3-pole double throw switch. Those who watch me regularly will know I've started doing that. All this does is it attaches the input of the circuit to the ground when the circuit is off. I took that from Marcus Reeves. He does like a little minute long tutorial, if you like, on Instagram now and again. Great tutorials. And I'd just never seen that done before. And now I think about it, it's pretty obvious. So I'm going to do that on all my pedals from now on. Next up, on this bottom row, the first tag we come to is 9 volts. However, that's also attached to the 4th tag along. If you remember, we run that underboard wire. You know, I'm allergic to underboard wiring at this point, basically. I keep getting it wrong. But anyway, I can see we've soldered it in there. So I'm going to run that 9 volts up to one of our resistors here on this board. Then we planned for 9 volts in and then 9 volts out to our Rangemaster. So I'm just going to run a wire from there, round and up, and attach to the bottom of this capacitor here, the 33 microfarad cap. And that's our power into our Rangemaster. That means we've got power going into all of our JFETs, which is the power for the Kossoff, and then power going into our Rangemaster. Right now we're going to wire up the output basically of the whole of the Rangemaster. So this is our output cap here, our 10NF ITT cap, and the output comes from the collector of our transistor. It goes to pin 3 of our audio potentiometer. I'm probably going to run a solid wire, like a cut-off to there, just to add a bit of stability to this end of the tag board. Then it comes out of pin 2, the wiper, and goes round to this side of our 10NF cap, our output cap. And then it goes through the output cap, out of this side of it, round and to the front right hand pin of our 3-pole double throw switch. Now, output caps, this is an interesting one. Usually I go for 22 NF on my Rangemasters because I feel like it lets more through. So for those who don't know, the lower the value of your capacitor, the higher the pitch of sound is going to be, essentially. So if you were to let if you put a 10NF, what am I talking? 15 UF cap on there, a 10 UF cap, something like that, it would allow the whole spectrum through for our ears. But the lower down you go, the more trebly you're going to get. So 10NF is definitely more trebly than 22 NF, which is, you know, whatever. But the reason why I do 10 NF on my Kossoff drive, on my FreeRange pedal, is because it's going straight into the Kossoff drive, and that means that now we're gonna sort of like allow less bass through, so that then we don't muddy this up when we have them both on together. Basically, I mean, someone's going to open up their FreeRange now and say mine has a 22 NF, quite possibly. And another favourite of mine for that output, if I can grab it, are these. This is a 15 NF cap, so it's like the middle ground. It's a Weimer cap, a gold Weimer. These are the same ones that were found in the infamous Crocskin amplifiers, the Selmers. I absolutely love these, and I should have really went with them for that, but I couldn't find a packet, so we're going with a 10. Anyway, let's get that wired in. The 3-position EQ switch in this pedal is like having 3 Rangemasters in one. It takes you from treble boost to mid boost to full range boost. All usable tones depending on what guitar and what amplifier you're using. Combine that with the Kossoff drive and you're going to be hitting mojo vibrato in no time. Next up and last for our Rangemaster really is the other half of our double pole double throw switch. Now if you think about it, this switch is adding a second cap on top of this 5 NF cap. So we're going to add in a 6.8 NF cap or a 22 NF cap on top of the switch. And we've wired in this half of the cap, so now we've got to wire in this half of the cap. So we can see this, the center pin, the base of our transistor, and where it meets these caps has got to attach to the other center lug of our double pole double throw switch. So I'm just going to run a wire out the back, underneath, and it's going to come up in the same fashion as this wire here, through the middle and attach just there. That's our Rangemaster side wired up and ready to go. Next we're going to move on to the Kossoff side. Now the Kossoff, the input comes from this leg here on our first JFET, the J113. It's going to come out of there, round, round this wiring loom here, up and to our front left pin. It's going to go through this pin again, the same as this one, just as an earth or a ground for the whole circuit. And that's our first connection on this side. Next up, we're going from the tag attached to the first leg of Q2 or J201, and that is going to go round to gain 2. So this is our gain pot here. Now gain 3 is underneath the tagboard. That's going to be an absolute nightmare to wire in. There's nothing I can do about that. It's just the way that this is. There's not much space. But gain 2 needs to go underneath the board and pop up and come out onto the first leg of our J201. Next up, we're going to move to the top row of our Kossoff drive. First things first, I'm going to attach the earth connection. So that, in fact, no, I'll leave that to last, and that's because it's going to go across. All it is we take one of our, in fact, what am I talking about? We don't even need to do that because we attached the earth connection to the earth on our Rangemaster underneath the board. So don't need to. In fact, the best way to test that. First thing I'm going to stop saying in fact. The best way to test it is to put our Fluke 101 on ohms. And then go between the earth over here and any of our connections that are supposed to be going to earth. And if we take a look, we can see that it is earthed out. That's 1.2 ohms, 1 ohm. That's definitely earthed. And if you want one of these Fluke 101 meters, you can get them through the Amazon affiliates link in the description. This thing, let me tell you, has been round the world with me. It's been to the Arctic. In fact, I shot a video of me building a fuzz for one of my friends out in the Arctic. It's been tracked by Slava class cruisers. It's been to the Mediterranean, Gibraltar. It's been to the Gulf. It's been to the Far East. It's tracked the new Chinese submarines. Well, not personally. It didn't go around tracking the Chinese submarines, but it was on board at the time. And I used to have this thing wrapped up like this in my overall side pocket, just carrying it around with me. I can't even describe how well it's held up. Anyway, if you want one, you can get it through the Amazon affiliates link. I will get a kickback, and I really do appreciate it because it means I can buy awesome things like my matching set of Nipex snips. Get on. Right. So we know that's earthed out. We don't need to connect that. There's only 2 connections on this top row here that we need to connect up. And the first of which is the second tag along on our Kossoff drive, which is here. This is going to go to our gain pot, tag 3 or pin 3, the one that's right underneath. Fine, that's easy. We'll just run a wire underneath the board. It'll pop out here. We won't even see it. Then, the interesting one and a harder one to run is the second tag from the end. This is our output. So our output comes through a 15k resistor right here, right at the end. And that goes to our tone pot, tone 2, which is the center lug of our 50k pot. And it also goes to the this pot here. This is the tone pot. I was just thinking then, why have I put the tone in the wrong place? So it comes out of here and goes to the center lug of our tone pot. So tag 2. And then another wire also comes out and goes to tag 3 on our volume pot, which is our 100k potentiometer. So tag 3 volume pot, tag 2 tone pot. That's all of our wires wired up for this now. All that's left to do is the caps for our double pole double throw switch. We've got a resistor from our gain pot and a cap from our gain pot, that is from our tone pot, that go to ground. Great. And then we've got all of the standard off-board wiring. So I'm going to tackle that next. Let's talk about guitar signal. So our signal comes in here, the left-hand side, which, as you will note, is the right-hand side, the input, when the pedal's the right way up. I say it all the time, but if I'm not building on camera and I'm testing a pedal, usually I'm like plugging into the input here, which is actually the output, and I'm getting no sound, and I spend about 20 minutes tracing around, and then I realise I'm an idiot. So, input here, we're going to come from this tag here, under the board, round our ponytail, and into the input of this 3-pole double throw switch. We'll then add a link wire in here, because on bypass, that's how the signal gets through. Then, we'll come out of this tag on our 3-pole double throw switch, round our wiring loom, and up this ponytail and into this tag here, which is the input to our Kossoff drive. And then we'll do exactly the same thing, another loop for our bypass signal, and then we're going to come out of here, the output of our Kossoff drive, and it's going to come round underneath the board up and to this tag on our output jack. Done. There's our signal done. Next up is going to be our 9-volt DC. So I'm going to connect both of these pins together because this center pin is for if you have a battery. So if you've got a battery in here and you plug this jack in, it disconnects the power supply from the battery. Great. I don't care about that because batteries and pedals are for fuzz faces or vintage pedals, not for pedals that go on your board. I'm surprised I don't get more hate for that, but everyone seems to agree. So there's going to be a wire coming out of both of these joined together round and to our other resistor on our filter board, and that'll then supply power to the 3 JFETs and our Rangemaster. Brilliant. Let's go ahead and get them wired up first. That's all of our signal wired in, but something really struck me. Look at this. They're not symmetrical, so that means that I haven't wired something up, and it is indeed that output from our Kossoff drive. So where does that come from? It comes from pin 2 of our volume pot. So right in there, and then I'm going to send it underneath the board, round this wiring loom, and straight into here. I did jump ahead and wire in both of our LEDs. And then when I was wiring up, I noticed something horrific, and I really wish I hadn't wired them up now. So I've just went back through all the footage of when I was putting all the circuit boards together, and I looked at the Vero board, and unfortunately, like an absolute idiot, I don't remember adding in a link wire that links in our second 2 trim pots to the live. So that there shouldn't be any power going to these now because I just didn't wire it up. I can't believe it. What an idiot. So now let's plug it in and find out. Part of me is like cringing, hoping to God that I put it in, but I can't see on any video if I have. But there's it plugged in. Do we get light? Yes, we do. See, now there's another thing. I don't know if this is coming across well on camera or not. Because the light's underneath our paisley, this one's really bright because there's no pattern over it. This one's kind of dull and purpley. Don't know how I feel about that. I need to think about that. Maybe I'll put some bezels in there, but I kind of like the stealth light thing. Anyway, more importantly, let's see if we've got any signal using our illustrious Fluke 101 on the volts DC setting. Go from earth or ground. Better do it this side where I'm not actually blocking out the Fluke from the camera. And we go to our first JFET. We go to the bit where the 9-volt DC attaches in. 3.6 volts. Great. Our J201. Nothing. Disaster. Q3. Nothing again. Which means that it didn't add a link wire in. So the trim pots aren't getting any voltage to them. So they can't supply voltage to these 2 JFETs. Which is, in my opinion, the worst possible thing I could have done. Because I've steel reinforced epoxied that damn board in. So now I'm going to have to pull it and see where we are. And also to pull it, this is another annoying thing, is these resistors here. I've got solid core from our LEDs going straight into this. So I'm going to have to clip that out before I pull the board. And it also means I've got no space to get in there. Brilliant. This is why you build from a schematic and keep checking yourself. If you don't check yourself, you make a stupid mistake like this and it causes you more work. There's the board pulled. I got most of the steel reinforced epoxy off and we can see there is no link wires on the bottom at all. So what do we need to do? Basically, our 9 volt is coming in through this resistor here. Forget all that crap off the end. This resistor here. And it's going to this blob right here. And it's not going anywhere apart from, if we follow the track down, to our first trim pot, the input of our first trim pot. The reason why it's not going anywhere else is because it's not attached to anything other than the capacitors that are filtering it to ground. We've put some cuts on our board that stop the power coming up this way and ruining the circuit basically. So what we need to do is we need to join this blob here to the first pin of both of these trim pots, where then there's a resistance added to it to make the voltage change, and then it comes out at this position here. So really what I need to do is run a wire from probably, I'll tell you what I could do, this is interesting, I could go from this leg on our capacitor, because that leg is part of the live circuit, it's 9 volts there basically, straight down and go into this tag here, no, this tag here, which would run down and connect to this pin here if there's not a split in it. Because it's a bit of a mess, I can't tell if there's a split in it. So what I will do is, I'll just check. If we put it on ohms, and we go from this end of the strip to this end of the strip, if there's continuity. So if I just push this leg through the board, it will attach with this resistor. So again, we're going to follow down from this pin here where we want to get our voltage to, push it through. And then if I solder this from the bottom side of the board, just to hold it in place for now, we can get it. Oh, look at that. Just nearly took my camera out. That was bloody hot. Don't touch something straight after you've soldered it. What an idiot. I'll leave that in just for fun. Right, there we go. So now on the bottom side of the board, what I want to do is make sure that this isn't going to foul the next leg along. So if I give it a snip, I can run my blade through the centre just to make sure that there's nothing crossing over to the next tag. Because what I don't want to have to do is take this board out again. Seems good to me. Snip off the excess. All good. Now comes a little bit more of a tricky one, and that is because it's this tag here. So now we want to get this to attach to this basically, and I'm going to do it with a wire just because it's the easiest way to do it. So if I follow this all the way back up, we're going to go into this bit here, or anything along this row here. I shall strip my wire. This time we're going to go from the top side of the board, just because this is where the wire is going to run through. That's a little bit close to the negative there. I don't really want to go that close to it. So I'm going to come down here. That seems fair. Oh, well done, Joe. There. It's resting in the right place. Let's spin it round so then it's not going to foul another column. Right. There's that in. It's attached to where we want it to go. And now all we have to do is run it round. Don't want to go too close to where I'm going to be operating the screw parts of it. See, this is a nightmare. I could have just done this when I first did the pedal with just component legs from the top down. That would have been a preferable thing to do, but because I'm an idiot, I didn't. What else can you do? What can you do about it? It's done now, I suppose. It did give us a chance to realise that we made a mistake and rectify it, which kind of feels good. I've got this real odd outlook on life where I like to look at the positives rather than saying, oh no, I made a mistake, this is terrible, I've got to pull it out. I like to think of it as, awesome, now I get to do more soldering. There we are. It's not as clean as I'd like, but you know, these things happen. I'm going to go ahead and get that reinstalled back in there and we'll see where we are. This is the most important part of doing all of this. This is the most important part. If you take away anything else, this is the bit that you need to take away. It is, of course, biasing. We're going to bias both sides of our pedal. I'm going to start by biasing the Rangemaster side just because that's way easier. And then we'll get into the epic mentalness of trying to bias JFETs properly. So first things first, we want to put our Fluke 101 onto volts DC. Now this actually really helps if you've got the holes available where your screws go through, which I clearly haven't done yet, so it's a lot harder now. I've got the this is leather, so it doesn't split as easy as some of the other finishes do, and I don't really want to get into doing them all on camera because it's a nightmare and it's wasting time. So if I just lift that up a little bit and then find my snips wherever I've put them and snip off the excess, we can at least get our negative probe through there, and that can go in there. Now first test to do is make sure that we've got 9 volts going into the pedal. We have 9 volts going in. Brilliant. Now we want to check the collector, which is pin number 1 on the top row of our Rangemaster. Right, that's showing that we've got 0.45 volts. That's nowhere near what we need. We actually need between 6 and 7 volts for the Rangemaster. Traditionally they were 6. Look at this. Oh no, not that is right. Let's undo that. Yeah, traditionally on a Rangemaster, people used to set them to 6 volts. I normally set mine to around 6.5 to 7 volts. But 7 volts is good. A lot of people think that sounds good. It really does depend on the transistor that you're using. So I'm going to just rest that probe in there and try and only touch the collector like that. And remember, this is the trim pot we're going to be adjusting for this one. So to adjust that, I'll just do it from this side and see which way makes it go up. That's down, so that way must be up. You've got a long way to go. There you go. 4 volts. It's jumped up to 7.7. So if we just slowly decrease. Right, this is going to be a nightmare to set because it's right on that hairy edge, which is no good. And that's because I've used a 20 odd K resistor when really you could get away with a 5K resistor. What trim pot, whatever you want to call it. The reason why I used the 20K, even though it's harder to set, less practical, causes more problems, is because I've got these 20K trim pots that are bloody awesome and I love them. I want to use them, so I am. Right, 6.89. That looks good to me. 6.9 volts. Right, so we know that that's making sound good. We can get into fine tuning that later. And fine tuning that will be exactly the same as setting all of our JFETs. Okay, so the main thing you're going to need is one of these. It's an audio probe. Now, if you haven't got one and you want to learn how to make one, I have a video out and I'll link it in the description of this video, just so then you can go ahead and make one. It costs pence. All you'll need is one of these off a multimeter, a lead. In fact, you may not even need that. A 100 NF capacitor, a crocodile clip, and a guitar cable. And what I've done is I've took this guitar cable, I've attached it to 2 jacks that we have now plugged our amplifier into. So basically anywhere that I touch with this probe is going to amplify that point of the circuit and send it to my amplifier, and then we'll be able to hear exactly what's going on. Okay, so if I touch the input, we should just hear the input. This here connects to ground, so I'm going to connect it to this jack here. And now wherever I touch this probe is going to be where the sound is. So if we press play on our wire tap, no sound coming through. But if I touch the input, we get sound. No sound. So if I go input here, we're getting sound. And then right the way around our, basically this will go to here and then here, and we could just get sound all the way through. But what happens if we click on our Kossoff drive and go to the output of the first JFET? So if we go to the output of that first JFET, that's the sound we're getting compared to the clean sound. Now I would say that sounds pretty good, but what we do is we get our screwdriver onto our trim pot, ready to go. It's just by luck that we're getting sound there. You may get no sound, right? And then we're going to put this onto the point where the output of our JFET, and then we're going to twist the screwdriver until we get a sound that sounds good. See that? No mistake. It's a bit difficult to get it in there with this. See, not very good. We can slowly increase. If we go around it, it'll start getting worse again, like misbiased. What you want to do is, let's just stop that. What we want to do is, we want to set it to the point where we get the most sound out of it in most situations. However, because this is our first gain stage, if you like, I'm going to set that a little bit lower. So all it's doing is just increasing the gain level a bit and maybe buffering the signal as it goes through the pedal. Okay, so let's press play again. If I give that a twist, you can hear this is probably the loudest. And now it's kind of getting misbiased and stuff, so we don't want that. Let's go the other way. That sounds pretty good to me. Now let's go to Q2, which is our JFET. Now this one's a bit different because it's a 100k trim pot on this one. What people say is normally you set your JFET to 4.5 volts. Your J201. They say set it to 4.5 volts. So why don't we do that? We can go to voltage. This pin goes to our ground connection, and then we go on to the output of the JFET, which is where it attaches this capacitor. Oh, let's press stop on that because signal going through it doesn't help. If I hold it that side, you'll be able to see 0.2 volts. We don't want that. We want to go right the way up to, there's no way of me doing this where I can actually see the thing without getting in your way. So awkward. Right, let's see if we can increase that and what we get. Seven volts, we don't want that. We want to set it to 4.5 or thereabouts as a starting point. Oddly enough, I find the starting point for the J113s is 2 volts, 2.2 volts. That's a good starting point. It's definitely not where you should leave it. You do have to kind of do it by ear to get the best out of it. Now there's 4.2 volts. We'll leave it there. Right, let's move that out of the way and then go back to this probe and test what the audio is doing. So let's press play. That's quite meaty. Another thing I forgot to mention is that when I'm doing this, I have all the gain, tone and volume turned up absolutely full. Just so then you get the most extreme setting and you can dial back from there. Okay, so let's press play and give it a twiddle. Is that a technical term, twiddle? Sounds worse, misbiased. Keep going, and then it starts getting fizzy, so we'll go back. Right, did you hear that big jump in volume? Perfect. And if we hold that on there, getting a little bit of background noise, but it's not absolutely terrible. Let's move on to number 3. And don't forget, we have to tweak these in all together at the end, just to make sure that we're getting the best possible sound out the pedal, not just each transistor. Well, we're getting nothing here out of this one, so that's interesting. Could be misbiased, or it could be something wrong with the circuit. I would say there's something wrong with the circuit here. because... Oh, I'll tell you what's wrong with it. I haven't pressed play. Right, let's press play on a wiretap. Now let's see why we're not getting. Fizzy, and then we come up. I'm going to leave it there. We could just put now, actually, we can just put this on the output. That's the overall pedal. It sounds really aggressive because all of them are turned up max. So what we can do is we can undo our amplifier from our audio probe. Get rid of the audio probe. We don't need that now. We've dialed them all in by hand. Now let's listen to it as a whole. So let's put this in here. Press play. That's what we're getting maxed out as a whole. So I'm going to go back to Q1 now and dial it back a bit. And we can hear with it off. There's a little bit of fizzle in the background, but it's not too gainy, it's not too noisy or whatever. Bearing in mind that the back of the pedal is open. I mean, once that's covered, you're not going to get RF frequencies. I've got a ton of lights here, so generally speaking, it should be quite loud. Now, if we flip this over, this is going to be a bit of a difficult one. We've got everything turned up full here. Now let's press play and dial back the gain and see what it sounds like. Right, scratch all of that. I know where we're going wrong. Do you know what I haven't done, don't you? So the Kossoff drive, I haven't attached the resistor or the cap for the gain and tone. So we're going to get some funky readings anyway. I was saving doing that until we had the power supply sorted. So let's get them attached and then we can talk about it. So what are these going to be? It's going to be a 22 NF capacitor from the, I'm pointing at the gain but talking about the tone, from the tone pot, from pin 1 of the tone pot to ground, 22 NF. Then we're also going to have a 2.2k resistor going from our gain pot, pin 1 to ground. Now if you increase that resistor on the gain pot, you'll get more gain out of it ultimately, which is why this thing sounds so gainy, is because it's just getting all the gain, nothing's getting bled off. So the higher value resistor you put in this position, the more gain you're going to get. I have done versions with a 1 meg pot, but I tend to only like it up to 500k, and this is meant to be hitting Kossoff's tone. So there you go. Right, I'm going to go ahead and attach them now. Okay, so here we are for the second round. I have indeed fitted my 22 NF cap. I went with a Sprague 2000 volt cap, same as this one, just because they're awesome caps, and I really think this pedal is going to be special. And then for the resistor, I went with a 47k resistor. So that's going to give us maybe, I don't know, a tiny bit more gain than normal. But why did I choose that? And this is going to sound terrible to most people. I chose it because I have these resistors and they look bloody awesome. It's not going to make that much difference to the tone, tiny bit more gain, but you could dial that out by just having a lower gain setting. So I went with it. And now we've got our audio probe set up again. So we have our probe here ready to go, and we've got this attached to the earth. But before we do that, we're going to have to start by setting the JFETs to the thereabout setting, because this will all be thrown out now because of our mistake. So let's make sure that everything's turned up to full. It is. Fantastic. Now we'll put the black lead to ground, so I ground it on the enclosure there. And the live lead is going to go, first we'll check we've got 9 volts going in. Oh, helps if you put it to voltage, Joe. Well done. So first we'll test if there's 9 volts going in. There is. Now we'll go to Q1. And remember, for the JFET, for the J113s, we're going to be setting 2.2 volts. So that's a 4.4 volts. Remember, we haven't touched that. from when we set it before. So it just goes to show you how much difference the cap and the resistor make. Let's take it down to 2.2. There you go, close enough for government work, 2.18. And then the J201, best practice, or the internet, I should say, rather than best practice, tells us that we want to set that to 4.5 volts. So it's currently at 7.3 volts. Let's see if we can dial that back a bit. So what have we got? 4.5 nearly. In fact, we don't have to be exact. This is just a thereabouts because it's a starting point. So we've got 4.3 volts there. And now Q3, which is also a J113. So we're going to set that to 2.2 volts. This one's at 2 volts at the minute, so it's not much. And remember, these pedals, you can set them however you like. When you do it, when you audio probe it like you should, you can set it to whatever your ears are telling you. You don't have to set my settings, do your own. Fantastic. Right, so now we're all plugged in. I have my probe at the ready. First thing I'm going to do is turn on the wiretap. I won't forget this time. So we've got signal coming in. Do we have signal coming in, Joe? Let's see, maybe I've changed the song over. There you go. Signal coming in. And now let's see what Q1's doing. That sounds good to me. That is exactly what I'm looking for in the Q1 position, but let's just give it a fiddle so you can hear the difference. Hear how that's really gaining out. If I set the pedal like this, it's going to really push the other two J-fets probably far too much. So what I'm going to do is just dial that back. Remember, this stage is just like a little bit of a boost. So that's what I've got that set to. That's my clean tone, and that is the first stage. That sounds good, so I'm going to leave that there. Now we'll move on to Q2, which is our J201. Oh man, she's a tone. That takes it away. Let's go the other way. Right, this works much better. If you have like chords going through it, and of course if you haven't got a wiretap, you're going to be playing them yourself. Or what I used to do was lie my guitar on the floor and strum it, and then do all this while it was just ringing out. If you haven't got a wiretap. That sounds good to me. Moving on to Q3. I'm going to set that there. Right. So then the last part is if we undo our audio probe and get that out the way, we can go on to just adjusting. That's our clean tone. Right, we can go on with just adjusting. Now I like to leave the volume of full and the tone of full to start with, and dial back the gain to about 9 o'clock. I mean, I'm guessing because there's no knobs on here, but you dial that back to about 9 o'clock. And if you get a clean signal, for example, you know, if you dial that back and it starts sounding misbiased, you need to go back and tweak. But if you get a clean sound, we're all good. So this is it up full. Let's dial it back. Right, and that is minimum gain setting. it's still quite gainy, so I'm going to want to probably adjust this and take a bit out that Q1 position. That to me sounds pretty good. That's its cleanest. That's totally clean. And that's the pedal's cleanest. I'm happy with that. If you dial it up. Dial the volume back. And the tone. And then if we add the Rangemaster side in. Right, you get the idea, but don't forget this is a digital signal coming from the wiretap, so it's not going to be how it responds properly. Of course we need a guitar for that. Before we get there, what we haven't done is the last two caps, which is the last two bits of soldering of the whole pedal, which is our switch. Now, the two cap values are 6.8, yeah, and 22. The way this switch works is when I push this switch down, it actually engages the two toggles at the top. So it's like the opposite way around, if you like. So if I push it up, it engages the bottom ones. So what that means for us is, when I switch it down, I want it to go deeper. I want more bass. So that means that our heaviest cap, which is our 22 NF, has to go at the top. Because if we put it at the bottom, like you would think, when we flick down, it's going to select this cap instead, because it's actually the top two tags that'll attach. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, please let me know, and next video when I'm doing one of these switches, I'll elaborate further. I'm going to go ahead and get them in now. And another thing, actually, before I get there, is there's not much space in there. I'm going to try my best to get this mustard cap in there, because I know it's an amazing cap and they sound awesome in these pedals. So I may have to do a little bit of squeezing, but we'll see. Now I know what you're thinking. Joe, this is your flagship pedal. Why do we want to listen to you play them 3 licks that you can barely play? Well, I've got you. Before we get to the sound sample, I'd just like to say that the sound sample is going to be my buddy Jack Williams, who can actually play guitar. He's done a full demo of this pedal. So because this is my favourite pedal, basically my signature pedal, and the goal of this pedal was to make it sound as good as it could at bedroom levels and to try and hit that area that Kossoff lives in. There was no way that these fingers were ever going to do it. I just can't play like that, we know that. So rather than use the TC Electronic wiretap, my buddy Jack Williams is going to smash it out the park. And if you want to follow him, check out Instagram, Jack Williams Guitar, and you'll be able to see way more. But before we get to the sound sample, you know what's coming. If you haven't already, please just press like on this video. If you press like, more people who like similar things to you will also get to see it. And that means that my channel will grow and I'll be able to bring more value to you. Thank you so much. Now, let's listen to Jack wail on the guitar. Thank you so much for watching this video. I love this pedal, it's my signature sound and I hope you all agree. If you're interested in this, you'll love this video where I show you how to build just the Kossoff drive on its own.